All right. I think it's Friday. I think
I
it's
think it's Friday.
5 a.m., but it will soon be
Well, 5
the
p.m.
right time. Five,
Yeah,
yeah, see, there you go. That's why I think it's
exactly.
Friday. I'm not even sure right now.
I'm not sure either. I had a rough sleep. We were talking just the other day about how I've been sleeping a lot. Man, last night my anxiety and
Oh, oh.
insomnia came back, and so 5 a.m. this morning I could have podcasted. It'd have been no problem at all.
The residual effects of dealing with the bomb cyclone.
Exactly. I just like wake up in the night. Ah!
What changed? It's like, oh, now they changed this or changed that, or oh man, that was,
So
that is so tough, and I know we talked about a bit about this, but race week is always hard. I find it hard, to manage the anxiety. But when you're dealing with weather, you're a sudden change in weather, you're dealing with course changes or potential course changes, or there's talk about it being canceled. Now there's all that's wrapped into it going into race morning, which obviously Ironman California was canceled the morning of the race.
you want to know something interesting? I really took a step back, and I know we talked a little bit of the step back, but I started thinking about it. The anxiety started like 6 to 8 weeks before when
Mm,
COVID was, the Delta variant was going strong.
yeah.
There was so much smoke in the air in
That,
Sacramento. And we're like, I don't think this is going to happen. And even that anxiety, I think, builds up,
yeah.
you know, because they're like, do, when you're out training, you need that carrot for some of those
Hmm.
longer, harder sessions.
Hmm.
And when you're like in the back of your mind, like, it's might not happen.
Yeah.
um and I know everyone's been dealing with that side of things,
Yeah.
right, for the last 2 years, but then you add into it this part, and
Yeah.
you're right, there was a lot of unknowns, and I'm just thinking back even to like the river,
Hmm.
because we were in two separate rivers, and all, on the Facebook pages, everyone was talking about, E. coli and the temperature, and people were posting with thermometers, and the one river was 59 degrees
Hmm.
and the other one was 62. And then there was a confluence where the two rivers came together. And if the wind is wrong, you get some crazy like waves at that spot. And all of these things are like adding up
Yeah.
into anxiety. And
Hmm.
John, I haven't deferred my spot yet
All right.
into
Interesting.
next year's races. And I'm starting to think about this, like, what race could I do with the least anxiety?
Yeah.
Right? and and
Well,
and that and it shouldn't be like that for me. I've raced so many times, but
yeah. Well, but okay, so I've used the term anxiety, but I don't think it's always anxiety. It's just mental processing of information, and you're constantly thinking, okay, well, okay, now you're speaking of the water temp and the wind direction. Well, if the wind's going to be this way, I got to expect this. That's not necessarily alone by itself anxiety, but you're processing it and trying to make a plan. Okay, but then if it's this, now what are we going to do? And that constant mind, just staying on it is that can be exhausting.
like, I honestly, and we've talked about this, I felt like the week after, I felt like I actually did the race.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
yeah, my legs weren't as sore, but like just mentally,
Yeah.
the decompression, how you go through a
Hmm.
decompression after a big race.
Yeah.
Like, I had that decompression, and at first I was like, oh man, I got to race now, and I was like,
Yeah.
I was going to do Lake Havasu tomorrow, and then earlier this week I'm like, no, what, I need to take a step back. Like,
Hmm.
there is nothing that I have to do,
Yeah.
right, in the world of triathlon except for podcast on Friday nights.
That's right.
And then, before we go on, I want to make sure that people know that John has been diligently, vigilantly, is that the word? Uploading these podcasts to iTunes and to other places for you to download. So if you don't want to watch us anymore, because really, who wants to watch John and I? But yeah, you can listen in. And John, are we almost caught up?
No,
Oh, we're up to September though, right?
I need to upload some more,
Yep.
and I think we have probably another 30 episodes before we're
Okay.
caught up.
So
So
you can get
yeah,
the backlog, and I think we're at almost 700 downloads on the podcast. So
yeah,
that's great.
yeah.
And then you always hate it when you hear people about the podcast and say, "Hey, make sure you like our podcast on iTunes." I don't even know if anyone's ever liked our podcast on iTunes, but if
I don't know.
if you feel like you want to, go ahead and do that.
That's right. No, that's great. It's sort of neat to be to showing up on these different podcast platforms, and we actually get some international listeners, so it's
Yeah,
pretty cool.
it is
Um,
super cool. Okay, so tonight we are going to talk about anxiety
Yeah.
in the swim of a triathlon.
Hmm.
And this comes from, so we've mentioned Vernice before. So Vernice is a graduate student at UNLV. And we're going to henceforth refer to her as our content curator, Vernice.
That's right.
And so Vernice did Pumpkin Man triathlon this year, and she had some swim anxiety. And and I, I talk to her pretty much every day. And so the first thing, Monday morning when I go into, actually was, yeah, it was Tuesday morning because this was the same time as Ironman California. I was like, how'd it go? And she's like, it was rough. And I'm like, oh no. And she explained to me that, getting out to the first buoy, well, first of all, it was choppy water, which she's not used to. She hadn't swum very much in choppy water. And then on her way to the first buoy, she got kicked in the face and her goggles came off. And that kind of set a cascade of anxiety. Adding the two things together, and she really struggled to actually finish the swim. And she's a good swimmer, but she's, things just kind of added up. And so, I talked to her about it, and I said, what we need to do? We need to do a podcast and talk specifically about this. And because I know this is not just a problem that Bernice has had. Many people have had it. John, I mean, in your years, how many people have talked to you personally about this?
Oh, I couldn't even tell you. It is the number one.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say it. It's the number one barrier to doing triathlon is swim anxiety.
Yeah, I completely agree. Way more so than, I don't know if I'll be able to do the run, or I'm not comfortable on a bike. And I know people are not comfortable on a bike, but you're absolutely right. Mm-hmm. In my sphere, same thing. I can't tell you how many people have commented to me or even like said, hey, you should do a triathlon. Oh no, I couldn't swim in that lake. Even my wife, who is a collegiate swimmer, does not like open water swimming. It doesn't make her feel good. Like, she feels anxious when we go into open water. And this woman has swam since she was like 3 years old and swam at a pretty high level. And she does it, but she doesn't enjoy it.
Right. Yeah. Same here. I've got a colleague friend who's was a high level international swimmer, and you brought him to Lake Mead, and he did not want to swim in Lake Mead. I did make him, but he did not enjoy it at all. And he did it once, and that was it.
Yeah, and before we can get into the anxiety thing, the one thing I'm going to add is Lake Mead is a great lake to swim in.
It is. Yeah.
It is actually one of the cleanest large lakes in the United States. And because there's just no major cities, upstream from us, so we don't get a lot of like actual sewage. And I can't even remember if we've ever had the lake be closed because of like E. coli, or I don't think we.
No, I don't think so, and I don't even think Swimmers Itch has ever closed. I don't even think we've. No,
I've gotten Swimmer's Itch there, but it hasn't closed down.
But nothing closed down. I can't think of that.
So that is a misconception in Las Vegas. Oh, Lake Mead. Oh, I wouldn't swim in that thing. I'm like, if you swam in some of the places that John and I have swam, Lake Mead is a breath of fresh air.
That's right.
It's a glass of clean water.
Yeah. And well, we need to talk about that. And I'll tell you, Vernice's story is not unique. Unfortunately, it is a big issue. And we should also plug the reason why Vernice is our content curator, because she helps find papers that we try to speak to on our evidence-based.
Every week she helps get us some content, and she finds some good stuff this week.
Oh my goodness,
some great articles from like the early 2000s from Triathlete magazine, and some just great content that she got us for this week. And I hope that her research in the content helps her, but also is going to help others.
Yep. So let me also say that when I'm not competing and I can volunteer, I always like to volunteer for the swim and do the kayak. And when I get in the kayak, I always try to be in that first 200-meter section of the swim, because we know that people are going to have the most problem in that section of the swim. And so I feel, trying to position myself ready to help out. And that first 200 meters is so important to having a successful swim. And I think we'll talk about some of that in terms of tips. And it is, the anxiety sometimes is based upon real data, because we know if you're going to die in a triathlon, odds are it's going to be during the swim. Whereas during a marathon, if you do die in a marathon, it's going to be at the end of the marathon. So it's a very different, the stats are almost the same in terms of rate of death. But with the swimming, it is something that, has a reality that anxiety can lead to drowning, because you can't just stop, and walk. It's not like the marathon. And so so there is some fear based upon the drowning.
Yeah, and not to discount the deaths in triathlon, because this is a significant issue in triathlon. But and I don't know the stats on it, but I would contend you might be more likely to die driving to or driving back from the race, because the numbers aren't that great compared to other things that we do that are potentially more risky. So I'm gonna throw that out. I don't know the answer, but it's not like it's not like people are dying every day in triathlon or at every triathlon. It is a very rare occurrence, but it is, you are absolutely right. It is a thing, and we need to be aware of it. And Ironman has put up like the swim smart mantra that in some ways has fallen short. And we can talk about that as well. But there's definitely some tips that, John, that we can give people. So you want to kind of go through some of the things that we can do?
Yeah, no, that'd be good.
So go ahead and give us your first tip.
Well, one of the papers that Vernice found I really liked, because it's something that we all think about, but it was good to articulate this. Train. And one of the papers that she found, it was really interesting how anxiety about racing in general changed over the course of a training program. Yeah. And, in the beginning of a training program, you're very anxious. You don't know if you can do, whether it's the swim, bike, or run, or the combination, or the distance. And so, but you go through that training program, and there's some things that this paper addressed in terms of giving people confidence. But then ultimately, 6 months into the training program, they were much less anxious, because now they felt more fit and they felt ready to do the race. And so I think that preparation is really important. But at the same time, I know a lot of us all get to a point in a training program where we say, "Gee, I don't know if I can do this." But
I think we all go through that.
That's right. And that's where the positive affirmation needs to come in, because you need to take a step back at that point and say, oh yeah, but I'm doing 10 hours, 15 hours, whatever it is, of training a week, which I couldn't do in the beginning of the training program. And so sometimes having that training log and just looking back at how far you have come is really important to setting yourself for a successful day.
Yeah, when you look at it and you see, oh man, I have swam 300,000 yards in the last 6 months. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying, I don't even know the numbers, but you start to look at that, and then it's an affirmation that you're gonna be okay. So John, I'm gonna pivot a little bit here, because I love where you went with that first one. You have students. I have students. Mm-hmm. I can't tell you how many students I've had that have test anxiety, and put in quotes, because it's something very similar, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things that we look at in test anxiety is preparation. Mm-hmm. If you've studied really well and you know the material really well, the research shows you have less anxiety going into an exam. Yep. And so the triathlon is kind of like that. It's the exam. And yes, you have to be prepared. You have to be able to swim, right? Like that's part of the deal here. Even in a sprint triathlon, the shortest ones tend to be 500 meters, 500 yards. The local ones in Las Vegas are 750. I don't think you have any business doing one if you can't swim 750. Mm-hmm. I mean, as harsh as it sounds, and as inclusive as I want triathlon to be, you have to be realistic on that. And if your training didn't go the way you thought it was going to go, and you were not successful, and you weren't able to get to the pool, and you weren't able to get into the lake, mm-hmm. and you really don't think you can swim 750, I think it's time to you pull the plug. And I hate to say that, but I think it's in your best interest. Yeah.
Racer almost did this weekend. One of the things they put in the note was, if you're in the Olympic distance event, if you don't think you can do the distance overall, then downsize to the sprint. And I like that. I think that verbalizes or articulates clearly that you've got to pick the distance that is appropriate for you. And I think you're right. If you can't swim 750 yards or meters in a pool, then and you've tried and you can't do it, then it's you're not going to magically get that fitness or swimming comfort on swim day, test day.
And then let's take a step further. And then, pool is nice, but the open water is different.
Yeah.
Right. So I would take even a step further. If you can't swim the distance of the race in a practice session, which you absolutely should do many practice sessions in the open water. If you can't do it, once again, like, you need to rethink your day.
Yeah.
And now, unfortunately, the local races here, they have duathlons where you can, and I know they're really good about letting people switch, even up to like the week before the race, just like it's okay to switch, it's, it's okay. We get it. Like you couldn't get to the lake, you couldn't get to the pool, you couldn't do what you needed to do. It's okay.
So, yeah. And, maybe the other thing to maybe take a step back on is even thinking about where else the anxiety comes from, because you're right. If we don't have the training, one, you've got the training problem, but now you've got other issues that are going to cause anxiety in the water.
Yeah.
And Lake Mead, you got some big fish down there.
I've seen very few fish when I've actually been swimming. The only time I see fish is when you're at the docks and people are feeding the carp.
Well, and that's good because they're more scared of the swimmers, so they're always going to swim away. So but it's in your mind. Sometimes you see this fish down there, and that's unknown or unfamiliar. Different shadows. And I remember swimming in the Adirondacks. I'm swimming in this lake, which wasn't very clear. But then all of a sudden, I just came up with this shadow because this tree was hanging over the water's edge. I just, swimming clear, and then the shadow. I was like, what is that? And it's just a shadow.
Or, you hit a piece of seaweed, or you hit,
yeah,
something is going. Here's the thing: is in a triathlon, if you don't touch anything swimming, you did well. Because I'm telling you, pretty much every swim I've ever done, it may be another person, but there's stuff in the water, right?
Yeah.
Like branches, like you said, or seaweed or plants.
Yeah, well, and okay, so Belinda comments here, fish are scary. And yeah, they are. And those who have done races in Lake Las Vegas probably maybe even swam into a dead fish at some point, which is that's no fun at all. When I swam in Texas, the water was dirt, mud. You could put your hand up 6 inches from your face and you couldn't even see your hand. There's no visibility. And this speaks to your point that, Lake Mead can have, 12 to 20 feet and even further visibility. And so it's so beautiful. But in Texas, there was always this fear of running into snakes.
In the water, yeah.
In the water, that's right. And sometimes bunches of snakes. And so that was always, in your mind is, am I going to run into a snake? But you just try to position yourself so someone's always in front of you or there's something happening.
Have you had a chance to swim in a lake that has crocodiles or alligators?
I have not. And that would be one area that I would be anxious.
It's a little nerve-wracking. I gotta be honest with you. In Miami, we've raced there 3 times, and you can't go in the lake before. They have a specific practice time you can go in.
Yep.
You cannot cool down after the race in the lake because of alligators.
Right.
So because they have all these people out, they're like looking, and that was a nerve-wracking one. I gotta be honest with you. Compared to fish in Lake Mead, I'll take the fish in Lake Mead every day. John, we can take it a step further, obviously, into the ocean and sharks and seals and sea lions. And we just had Oceanside. It's known for sea lions in that harbor. I can remember the first time going out there and watching my wife do the 70.3 there and watching sea lions swim alongside swimmers.
Yeah, right.
That'll freak you out.
Oh, well.
That'll freak you out. But once again, being prepared for that and understanding that, there's going to be stuff in the water. And once again, if that anxiety cripples you, you need to do some things to try and fix that.
That's right.
And if that means swimming in a lake before you swim in the ocean. So you take baby steps.
Mhm.
That's what you have to do.
Yeah, well, and, even taking it up to swimming in Hawaii, and you've got the dolphins, and now you've got, 50 feet visibility. You've got turtles, you got all sorts I swam into a turtle almost one time. I didn't touch the turtle, which was good because they're protected. But yeah, I remember swimming along, and all of a sudden this turtle is right in front of me. And it's like, so those types of things are unordinary, and they can make you jump. But you're right. You just need to practice, and swimming in all different types of open water is a good way to practice.
Well, we don't want to freak people out too much, but I'm going to share one other thing. So we raced in Denmark several years ago now. It was the ITU World Championship. And we swam in this canal, and the canal had so many jellyfish.
Oh, yeah.
You actually couldn't put one hand in without hitting one. Every stroke, you hit a jellyfish.
Yeah.
And fortunately, they weren't all the stinging kind. Some people got stung.
Yeah.
I didn't. But I got to be honest with you, I think it was a 3K swim. I probably touched 3,000 different jellyfish. And fortunately, we had a practice swim though, and they told us the briefing that this was a thing, and I'm like, oh, how bad can it be? But we got in the water, and you started hitting. Like, oh, that's like a paddle. I should grab onto one and give myself a paddle.
Yeah, Ironman Maryland is notorious for having jellyfish.
Yep.
So I've swum on Long Island, which has jellyfish and lots of debris. But I think the debris is a big issue. And you mentioned seaweed and what have you. And that can really throw people for a loop because, again, you're not used to, you're swimming in a pool. You're not going to have anything in your lane. And, so it can throw you off.
So John, let's talk about swimming in a pool and how little tactics we can do in the pool to help us with that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, one tactic that I really promote is being able to clear your goggles without stopping at the wall. And I know that sounds odd, but you should be able to swim, and in the middle of your length of the pool, just clear your goggles without touching the bottom and then go in again. Because, in open water, there are times that your goggles may fog up and you need to clear them. Or they, like Vernice mentioned, her goggles get kicked off and you have to stop and adjust it. And so I think being able to practice that in a pool that's a good skill. And you can realize that, it doesn't take that long to do this. And so maybe that actually encourages you to clear, and get rid of the fog even sooner than you normally would. And then you can sight better and you can see better and less anxiety of staying on course even.
Yeah, the other one I like is, this happens when you share lanes and you hit people.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm like, that's good. I'm good. Because in the pool, right, it's a little unnerving to like slap somebody's hand as you're going by or whatever. But I actually think it's a good thing, right? Like a little bit of contact when you don't expect it is okay. And then obviously, there's some groups that actually will put 10 people in a lane and say, okay, first person to the end wins. And that's, you may have to do that if you have the anxiety of having people around you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. That's a great one. And then I'll also say, take the wetsuit to the pool.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about claustrophobia. So, and maybe it's not a diagnosed claustrophobia, but there is claustrophobia with wetsuits and then with lakes, especially when you can't see.
Yeah.
So do you want to expand upon what you do with the wetsuit?
Well, the advice for a wetsuit is if it doesn't feel too tight, it's too big. And I don't really ascribe to that advice. You got to find the wetsuit that is fit for you. It should not feel like you're being choked. You should feel free movement in the shoulders, especially. And if you don't feel that, or you feel uncomfortable, it's not the right wetsuit for you. Now, that being said, putting a wetsuit on, standing up and being dry is different than getting in the water and swimming. Not that you want wetsuit going or water going in your wetsuit, because even though it's a wetsuit, meaning you get wet while in it, in a triathlon wetsuit, you tend to have less water going in the wetsuit. If you get too much water in the wetsuit, that can actually slow you down with too much drag. So yeah, with the wetsuit, the claustrophobia can be that constriction that you're not used to. And there's some things about putting on a wetsuit to try to reduce that constriction, or it just is not cut right for you. Try another size, another model, another brand.
And try and buy a brand that'll let you send it back
Yeah.
after you swam in it.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're right. Like I've had wetsuits. I bought wetsuits where I like, oh, this it's tied to my neck. Or I get in the water, it's fine.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't have known that if I would have just tried it on. I would have sent it back.
Yeah.
Right. But this company specifically said, you know what, we want you to swim in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's it's important. And then John, what about like hydration of the wetsuit? Do you purposely prehydrate your wetsuit?
I do not, but I know people do, but I do not. But your wetsuit does become more flexible over time.
Yeah.
And so, but I put my race wetsuit aside and I practice in a practice wetsuit.
Yeah. So I'll just share this with you. I hadn't swum in a wetsuit in a long time up until this fall. Actually, getting ready for Ironman California, there was no wetsuit races. I just did it. There were pretty much all the races I've done this year were not wetsuit legal, and so getting ready for Ironman California, like the weekend before, I'm like, okay, I need to break out the wetsuit because it's been a while,
Mm-hmm.
and so I bring the wetsuit out, and the first day in that wetsuit, oh man, my arms were so sore,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt like I was in pretty good swim shape.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh man, like this is gonna be horrible. Like I'm like, my taper is not going good. My arms are sore. And then so I'm like, I got to swim in it again. So on the Tuesday before the race, I bring it to swim practice again, and I wear it. I'm like, oh, that's way better. And my arms didn't get stronger. I think the wetsuit had been dried out and hadn't been used and kind of shrunk a little bit.
Yeah.
And then we did a pre-swim in a lake in California, and it was perfect. I was like, oh, this is fit like a glove, no problem at all. So I think there is something to swimming in your wetsuit and getting it wet and getting it maybe more flexible, like stretching it out a little bit. That actually is important to do. So I can imagine, like, if I hadn't worn that at all and I jump in and the first 400 yards, my arms are just so sore.
Yeah.
I think that's a real, that could provide some serious anxiety.
Oh, totally. No, that you're right. And we probably need to do a podcast on putting the wetsuit on and some of the adjustments you can make.
Yeah.
You want to work that neoprene up into the chest area as much as possible. You're both on the front side and on the back side. So you actually need someone to help you get that wetsuit material up high. So, but yeah, no, it's good. I wouldn't put the wetsuit on for the first time on race day.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, not even just putting it on, but getting it wet. I think that's I think that's important. And then, going back to the claustrophobia thing, when dealing with that, like the wetsuit can provide that claustrophobic feeling because of the tightness. Yeah. But also, we've already talked about being in the lake without vision. Because even on a clear lake, like in Las Vegas, if the sun is just coming up, even at Sand Hollow, where we have really clear water, if the sun is just coming up, you don't get good vision.
Right.
So what can we do for that kind of anxiety of not being able to see?
Well, you gotta have the right goggles. Number one, make sure that you've got if if the sun is going to be before race day, if you can figure out where the course is and go down to the swim course, the time that the swim is going to happen, and look and see where the sun is coming up. So then you can get a sense of how much you're looking into the sun, and then choose the right goggles. And if you have goggles that can help block that out so you can still see the buoys, that's great. But then the other things are to make sure what you're going to sight. And it's always good to be strategic about what you're going to look for. And to figure that out, you have to be down at the shoreline of the swim, because everything looks different when you're down at water level versus looking down from a bridge down looking on the swim. You've got to really be down at water level to figure out what to sight.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So I think those are some good tips. Let's talk about some tips as far as the beginning of the race, because I think that's where most of the anxiety happens and where most of the problems happen. When you talk to people, it's like, oh, that first 200 or out to the first buoy, that was the one that got me, and I never was comfortable after that. So what advice do you have for people on that, John?
Well, for a long time, the advice was sprint out that first 100 yards or so, or to that first buoy, and get away from the packs. Now, that advice was really built on the idea that you'd have these big waves of people going out, maybe 500 people at a time, if not more. There's some classic race videos out there of like Ironman Canada, and you just see 1,500 2,000 people all start at the same time. Ironman Arizona used to be that way. And people were saying, well, you want to get away from that group. Well, it's terrible advice because now, if you've got a 1.5K swim or whatever it is, your 4,000 swim, you're sprinting out that first 100 is not a good endurance technique. But to get away from it,
Before we move forward on that, so think about this. If in long distance triathlon, the swim is basically 10% of your time,
yeah,
right? And then if you're talking about the first 200, that's like 0.5, or that's 5% of the 10%. Like so it's such a small amount. You are not going to win the race.
No,
lose the race. You might lose the race, actually.
You might lose the race.
You might lose the race there if you do that tactic.
Yep.
So just think about like the rest of your day or the rest of your race is not contingent upon the first 100, 200. It can only, the first 200, 100, 200 can only hurt you, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, totally. And it can make for a miserable day because it can make for a miserable swim. And then it just has that cascade effect. And so the better advice, even for large waves or even small waves, if you're anxious about the swim, start in the back. Let the swim go and let some of that craziness happen. And then start. And you'll actually find that you'll have clean water to swim with, and you're not going to be running into large packs of people or getting hit by different people, or start out on the fringes of the wave as well, as another way to go.
Well, and plus the sighting's easier because you can actually sight off of people, right?
Yeah.
You look up and you see everybody's going that way. You're going the right way, right?
That's right.
It's not the best advice in the world, but it's true, right? If you let the whole pack go, and it doesn't take much, literally 10 seconds.
Yeah.
If you wait 10 seconds, the gun goes, take 2 or 3 breaths, and then go.
Yeah.
And you are, once again, you're not losing the race there.
No.
Right.
And now with the rolling starts, where they release 4 people at a time, that is a testament to what you just said. I mean, because they're only spacing people out 5 to 10 seconds. But yet once you hit the water, you're like, oh, no one's in front of me. I actually have, a chance to swim without getting pummeled or kicked or punched. So
John, that is an interesting one, the rolling start. And I know we weren't really going to talk too much about that, but I think that there is some anxiety of that as well, right? Because they put up these times. Okay, well, if you can swim under 40, you need to be here. Under 42, you need to be here. And what I see happening a lot is, well, number one, people want to get going quick soon. So you have people that aren't seating themselves properly. And I'm not saying not seeing yourself properly, like I'm going up one swim group. I'm saying like people are going to swim a 45 and a half and they're going up to the 30 group. And a lot of it comes because they think that, and it's true, it's going to get hot later. Right. So if I can get in the water 15 minutes sooner, then on the run, it won't be as hot. And I understand the logic, but I would implore you, if you have swim anxiety, to not do that, because when people are flying by you and they're going to hit you, right? Because they maybe only be breathing to one side and they can't see you. And next thing you know, you're getting hit here, you're getting hit there, you're getting kicked in the face, right? That is not going to work out well for you. So be honest with yourself in the seated swim starts. I know there you want to finish sooner and you want to avoid the heat of the day when you're running or whatever, but I still think you can lose more than you're going to gain.
No, that is great advice. And then even with the seated, if they release 4 whatever at a time, get on the outside. But no, I swim with the group that you think you're going to be either catching or swimming faster in, but still try to be in the right group. But the problem is people don't do a good job of self-seeding. So
Yeah.
It's
So the other one I like in that first 100, 200, and I've been very guilty of it, and I was really guilty of it in the beginning of my triathlon, is I would swim too fast.
Yep.
And but not even recognizing it, because you're excited, the gun goes off, there's everyone's around you, and it's like it is a melee, right? And you get this almost this warrior mentality for the first 100, 200, and then all of a sudden you can't breathe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the things that helped me is someone give me the advice of, why don't you do this for the first 100 is bilateral breathe.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to basically slow down,
Mm-hmm.
and or just do like a count, like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, like have a plan.
Yep.
And practice in the pool. Like when you're doing like a 400 in the pool, how many breaths or how many strokes per minute are you taking? And then what's the timing of those strokes? My wife actually taught me this. Like, she counts all the time when she's swimming. She just does it. And she's like, that's how I keep my rhythm.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if I'm open water, if it doesn't matter if I'm this and this. I know that if I'm distance swimming, this is my rhythm. And I for one, it personally took me a long time to recognize that that's why I was struggling swimming. I'd get 150 in and be breathless.
Yep.
And then the rest of the time I'm trying to catch up. And you don't swim well, because now you're starting to, you're turning your head further so you can breathe more and bring in more air, and the heart, you turn your head and you lift it up, and then your feet drop, and it's only bad things. But it's taken a concerted effort to ultimately do that.
That is great advice. In fact, I had that as one of my bullets. Know what breathing pattern you'll use. And I have that under race start. And you're spot on. You got to get right into your rhythm. And you don't swim that first 100 any different than you're going to swim that last 100. You're pacing it. It's an endurance event.
Yeah, exactly. So, John, you mentioned the getting the goggles knocked off or goggles falling off. Even in pro racing, we see this.
Yep.
So one of the things that I think is important is, like you said, practice it, but then know how to swim on your back a little bit. And be comfortable on your back.
Yep.
Right. Because in my opinion, that's the best way to do it, is to flip onto your back. You can kick a little bit as you're going if you want, just for your balance. You're not going to, if you're in a wetsuit, especially, you're going to be okay. If you're not in a wetsuit, you actually might have to kick a little bit to stay up.
Yep.
But on your back is the way to do it. And once again, practice that in the pool.
Yeah.
So you can actually do that. That's great.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I think that's so important to be able to be in different positions in the water. But I think you can also practice, and I do this all the time. I'll practice swimming cross stroke, stop one stroke, tip the goggles, get some water in it, and then just keep going. And so you can get pretty efficient at it in swimming. But
so, John, the next one I'm going to ask you is, we do in triathlon travel to races a lot, right? And I've had people that their first triathlon has been Oceanside. Now, Oceanside, it can be a rough swim.
It can, cold water too.
Cold water, rough swim. Even when it was all harbor, you go across the mouth of the harbor. I remember the first time I did it, I was not ready for 6-foot rollers. Because that's what it was that day. What do we do as far as when we're swimming in waves in particular? Do you have any tips on that?
Waves can be fun, but it does depend on which direction the wave is going. And are you swimming into the wave? Or are you swimming with the wave behind you? Or are you swimming parallel with the wave? It really takes some practice. And this is, again, why Lake Mead is such a great lake to swim in, because we get some wavy. We don't get the 6-foot swells, but we get a lot of wavy swims. And it may not look bad from the shore, but once you're out there, even a foot swell can really throw the stroke off. And you do need to be, it is good to practice in a wide variety of swims, of conditions of waves. But a lot of times it's a shorter stroke and you're trying to recover your arm. You talk more about a straight arm type recovery. You're trying to clear that arm over the wave.
Yeah. So unless the waves are breaking on you, my advice is just try and swim normal. Try and relax. Don't let the anxiety get to you. When and if you get a big bunch of water in your mouth because a wave happens to catch you right at the wrong time, you have to be ready for that. You be like, okay, it's okay. I actually don't need to breathe here. I can wait till I can get that out of my mouth. I can wait till the next time, I'll breathe again. If you can breathe, obviously you're saying breathe to the other side where the waves are actually breaking, but even then you could still catch it exactly wrong and get water in your mouth. So be prepared for a big thing of water in your mouth when you're trying to breathe. And I think it's important to recognize that is going to happen. And Johnny, I guess it comes back down to, you got to practice.
Yeah, and I love what you just said, because that made me think, you're right. Which way you breathe will matter in terms of how much water you're going to get hit with. Sometimes you want to see the wave coming towards you. Sometimes you want to be looking away from the wave. But you can get that water in you. And then the tendency is then to try to lift yourself up out of the water to look over the wave to see the next one. But you can't. You got to stay low in the water still.
Stay relaxed.
Just ride. That's right. No, that is great advice. Just ride the wave, and you'll go up and you'll go down. But yeah, don't try to lift yourself up to see over the wave.
And I'll go back to your advice on practice again. We tend to not want to go to the lake when it's windy.
Yeah.
Right. I get it, but they're going to race. The gun's going to go off, and unless it's, hurricane force winds or bomb cyclones, you're gonna, they'll race you in some pretty nasty water. Very rare, especially long distance racing, for them to cancel the swim because of wind. Right? Yeah, water quality, absolutely. Rip currents, absolutely. But very rarely will they cancel it because of heavy wind.
And if they do cancel it because of winds, it's not really for the swimming, it's for the kayakers, again, the boats and the rescue crew that's out there, that they can't maintain a position to provide some safety oversight. So
I'm going to suggest, make one more suggestion for people, because I get the anxiety. Trust me, like I had anxiety when I started this, just like everybody else. There's no reason. So if you go to the lake, there is no reason why you have to go up to those buoys to swim.
Yeah,
you can swim in 2 feet of water and go as far as you want around the lake.
Yep.
Right. And at any point when you feel nervous, you could stand up. And the people that I've given advice to that are getting into open water swimming, I always tell them that go out to the lake, never be deeper than where you can stand. And even if you don't, just go 100 out, 100 back, 100 out, 100 back. That's completely fine. You're getting used to the lake. You're getting used to the waves. You're getting used to all this. And especially if you're going to go out on a wavy day, there's no reason for you to go 150 yards out. Like the waves are just as good, 10 yards out as they are 100 yards out. And if you do take in a huge bunch of water, you can stand up.
That's right. No, and I love you. You've given the advice, just swim parallel to the shore, and just go, 3 feet deep is plenty. And just get comfortable swimming in the water in 3 feet.
Hey, the pool we swim at is 3.5 feet deep.
Yeah.
Right. I'm good. I actually don't like swimming in the deep end because I can't stand up at the end. Right. So I think it's really interesting that when we go out to the lake on a Saturday morning, where everyone goes out to the buoys. Like, okay, I get like you want to practice your sighting or whatever, but you do not have to go to the buoys.
No, and the other practice tip is get a tow buoy, one of those orange things that you put around your waist, and you're tethered to it, because that is just a great confidence builder, or it gives you a chance to build some confidence where you can swim for a bit, and if you need a break, just turn around and put your hand on that buoy, and you can rest and then get going again.
I saw somebody they didn't have one, and they had a children's life vest. They just got a little rope, and and that was enough. Like if they got into trouble, they could hang on to it.
Yeah, well, and either hang on to it, or a lot of times it's just you just need to put your hand on it, and you just need a little extra buoyancy force to hold yourself up.
Yeah. So don't let and trust me, the swim buoys are not expensive. Like they're like $20. But if you're kind of stuck, even at the lake, they have those life jackets, or just for kids. You can grab one.
Yeah. How about temperature? We really haven't talked much about temperature.
The bane of my existence.
Yeah.
I hate cold water, John.
There you go.
I honestly have this. I just hate it. It's why here's a little tidbit for you. a young Ted Gerard, 4 years old. Mom takes him to swimming lessons. I used to hide in the bathroom
Mm.
because of it wasn't, I didn't like the water. It was cold.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I don't like that. And I will, you take me swimming in some cold water, I will not like you. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but we have to deal with this, right? It's part of triathlon. So yeah, that can absolutely create anxiety.
Yeah,
And so, John, I hate to say it, but it comes back to practice again.
it does. And unfortunately, here in the Southwest, we have another great place that always has cold water that you can practice in down at Willow Beach.
Yep.
I know it's a little bit of a drive, but and there's some physiology behind what happens when you go in cold water. So even just putting your face in cold water can change your heart rate, it can change your breathing rate, and what have you. So you do need to get used to getting in the water, but also getting your face cold, and then learning how to relax and be able to get into your swim stroke.
So the other thing you can do is just always drink Slurpees. Brain freeze. Every day, just drink a Slurpee as fast as you can.
Mhm.
Of course, I'm teasing
Yeah,
right
right.
now, because that's one of the physiological things that happen is your sinuses actually get
Yeah.
really cold, and you actually get like Slurpee head and,
Mhm.
a brain freeze,
Yeah.
and it is a normal thing that's going to happen. But
Yeah.
I've noticed, John, that if I do a practice swim in that temperature, even 1 or 2 days before, I don't get that same reflex
Yeah, it's good.
on race day. So
Yeah.
you can, and I'm just saying,
Yeah,
speaking to yourself,
you can prep for it, because it is a bit of anxiety that happens when you put your face in cold water. That's sort of happens. So yeah, you can put earplugs in to keep the water out.
yeah,
Obviously a cap, but then even a neoprene cap. And anytime the water's under 60, I'm wearing a neoprene cap. And
yeah. I always do double caps,
yep,
and have one thick, like a latex thick
yeah,
one.
yeah.
And then you're right about the ears. So we did it's called the Big Shoulder Swim in Lake Michigan, just off of in Chicago, and it was cold. It was like 57. Like that's some of the coldest water I've swam in, like where we raced. And it was a long race, but we bought the wax stuff, and it
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
molds right to your ears.
yeah.
And man, did that that made such a difference, not having that cold in your ears.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a game changer for me, for sure.
Mm.
And it's not that, once again, not that expensive. I think 3 packs or 6
Mhm.
were like $4 or $5
Yeah.
or something like that. It was totally worth it.
And then something else on my list that we haven't gotten to. I know this sounds sort of obvious, and a lot of people already do it, but practice swimming in your cap.
Yeah.
Because it is, it is different than not having your cap on. How your goggles are fitting, how the water flows over your face will change with the cap, and so it is
Especially a new cap, right?
Yeah,
Because like we get to a race and like, okay, you have to wear this cap. It's brand new. It's tight.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
and there are people that I know that they have the same cap all year.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually it gets, kind of, it's not tight anymore, and it's a different feeling. So yeah, you're right. Because I don't swim with the cap. I'm bald, so when I go to swim practice, there's no cap. I don't need to.
That's
That's
right.
the point. But you're absolutely right. Now, when I open water swim, I always wear a cap. But I
Yeah.
do that I do it for safety, that
Yep.
boats and stuff can see you a little bit better.
And it also matters where you put your goggles relative to the cap. If you're an over the cap kind of person, then that's a source for leaking if your seal of the goggle goes over the.
Yeah, but here's the thing. So I'm over the cap guy, because if I do need to clear them,
Yeah,
it's a lot easier to clear them when you have
Sure.
access to them. So
That's
it's a cost benefit analysis.
it is. No, that's right. And actually standing in line, it's easier to have your cap on and then put your goggles over. But this is a good thing, actually, anxiety. If you don't swim with the cap, and then you put your swim goggle strap over the cap, the tightness of your cap or of your strap may actually need to be adjused. So
No, you're right.
practice.
Yeah. It's
All right,
funny how many times we've mentioned this, but yeah,
I know.
it always comes down to it. And we can circle back around to Vernice, because the number one thing she said to me, she's like, "Oh man, I've got to practice more in wavy water in a lake." She's like, "Every time I've been to the lake, it's been flat."
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, I haven't been enough. And she recognized that as well, and that was obviously some of the advice I gave her too, was you got to get out there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you just
Because
gotta
if
do it.
you can swim in the rough water at Lake Mead, that's going to build your confidence. And so many times when we've done the swim practices and it's been rough, and people get out and say, "Oh, that was so hard," and all right, that's going to help you on race day, because now you can look at race day, you look at what the water is, and you say it's not going to be as bad as this. So it is good to practice in that rough water, and that's why I've always liked swimming in streams and all different types of bodies of water, because it does just give you that confidence of being able to swim in open water.
It's interesting, like when we do some like road trips and travel, I'm like looking for little lakes and stuff. I'm like, "Oh, I just want to, just let's stop for a half hour and jump in and go for a swim." And Marie she's not a big fan of the open water swimming. Now, when we had, when COVID shut down all the pools, she
Yeah.
was much more likely to, because she loves swimming, she was much more likely to get in the water. But if there's an option, if there's a pool or a lake, she's always going to take me to the pool.
That's great. All right, so now we talked a little bit about this, but this is on my list now, to pre-start thoughts. So how do you calm yourself before the start of the swim? What do you tell yourself?
That's a great question. I don't know. Because honestly, I'm actually, I don't have swim anxiety. I don't anymore.
Yeah.
And so I'm actually thinking about the race. I'm thinking
Yeah.
about, probably the only thing I pretty much think about is that first 100 of taking it easy. I guess that's my thing. And then I also really am a big fan of not kicking hard, especially right in the beginning, because you can burn out your legs and cramp. And I used to have quite a bit of cramping issues swimming, and it was because I was just kicking too dang hard in that first 100. And so, yeah, I guess if it's anything, it's that. How about you?
All right, I always say, I do a Superman pose, and I'll say, this is what I do. I mean, we train, and to get that start line, and you just have the confidence, and you got to tell yourself, this is what I do. But then I also go through patience, because it's a long day, especially if you're doing a half or a full, or any distance. But you've got to have patience. You're not gonna, if you don't have a nice calm swim, the rest of the day is just going to be horrendous. So, and then I always make sure I've known the course, and so that when I get down to that start line, that there's nothing unfamiliar at that point. I know what I'm looking for, know where the buoys are. And yeah, I got one more, but think one event at a time. I guess that goes along with patience. When you're on the swim, think the swim.
Yeah, be mindful of where you're at and what you're doing. Yeah. My mind wanders sometimes in swimming, and I have to go, okay, be mindful. The bike will get there. The run will get there.
Yeah.
We'll get there. Don't worry, it's coming. But let's think about what we're doing now.
Yeah.
I got.
No, totally. And that goes back to what you said about counting strokes, and that if you do get anxious, sometimes you count, okay, 3 strokes. I'm just going to do 3 strokes now, do a little breaststroke. You're going to do 5 strokes, and you do, you just think being in the moment.
Yeah, agreed.
I also like swimming some of the courses where you can look and you can see things on, breath. And like Arizona is always neat because
the bridges and
happy, and the lakes, and sometimes you see a plane coming down and landing. And
yeah, I agree. That is pretty fun. All right, John. Hey, we're pretty much at an hour, and I think this is a great topic. Thanks, Bernice, for the content and the idea of doing this podcast. Bernice does not have to be the only one that can come up with ideas. So if anyone's watching and they have ideas, obviously post it in the chat. And we'd love to talk about other topics. And we'll see y'all next Friday.
Sounds good. Talk soon. Have a good weekend.
You too, John. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.